Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of the Speak the Truth podcast. Good to be back behind the mic because I, no kidding, just spent all freaking night traveling. Thanks to these government shutdowns, the amount of sleep I've gotten is like in tiny little spats. Last night reminded me more of a trip through Ranger School than it did through like American airports. I went and I stopped and had a layover inside of Phoenix, and there was just people scattered all across the freaking terminal, like laid out everywhere. I talked to one lady that said that she had been traveling for 3 days straight. 3 days. She'd started off her trip over inside of North Carolina and then had just been working her way back across America, trying to make her way over to California. I mean, I should have actually taken pictures and videos and everything, but quite frankly, I was just exhausted. But it looked like just like a massive zombie apocalypse had taken over the Phoenix airport. All of that because of like 10% reduction in flights due to the government shutdown, while all of the little regional flights, all those little like hoppers, pretty much got canceled. Right, or moved or changed, and they just started maxing out different flights in airports. The whole thing is a freaking nightmare and a mess. I thought at the latest I'd have been home by like midnight last night. No, we're not even going to get into it. I slept like next to nil last night. Absolutely nuts. But today we're going to talk about something that's very important. One of the undoubtedly world's largest terrorist attacks that had been planned ended up getting thwarted today over inside of India. Believe it or not. And it's something that I think that you guys should pay attention to and you guys should probably learn from, because what they stopped over in India could very well happen over here in the United States of America. We're talking about upwards of 250,000 people, estimates as high as 500,000 could have been killed if they were successful and if they would have actually carried out their plan in the most, how do you want to say, the most dangerous way. We'll use those terms right there. Good morning, Banana Gang, says Sandboy. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Good to have you guys joining me. Before we get into all that, I want to talk to you guys about this. Is the United States going to be going to war over inside of Nigeria? And why would we be going to war over inside of Nigeria? Donald Trump came out last week and he said if the Nigerian government continues to allow the killing of Christians, the USA will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria. And many may very well go into that now disgraced country, guns ablazing, to completely wipe out the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible atrocities. I am hereby instructing the Department of War to prepare for possible action. If we attack, it will be fast, vicious, and sweet, just like the terrorist thugs attacked our cherished Christians. Warning, the Nigerian government better move fast. Now, you got to ask yourself, why is it that Donald Trump is moving? Now, on face value, when we look at this and we say, yes, absolutely, like murdering of Christians, thousands of them, is not okay, right? Like we like, that's just not acceptable anywhere in this world. Like you shouldn't be murdering Christians. And I would agree with him on that statement. Like, let's take care of that and let's stop murdering Christians, right? Let's go in there and stop. Well, to bring you up to par, so far this year, you have about 7,000 Christians over inside of Nigeria, allegedly, that have been murdered so far this year. All right, you have millions that have been displaced. I even have a video. Let me grab this video and put this up here for you because, I guess Tucker Carlson had came out and he had complained a little bit about, us going to war, and had alleged that maybe there is some other, how do you want to say, motive for the United States of America. And you guys that follow this channel, you guys that are subscribed to me, know that normally when Tucker Carlson says something, I tend to not listen because he doesn't back it up with any facts, right? Like he just doesn't really do that very often. He goes, I'm just asking questions. He doesn't have anything out there. First, I want you to listen to this guy over inside of Nigeria. Allegedly, supposedly, he is a Christian, what do you want to say? Missionary over inside of Nigeria.
Tucker Carlson and all the other naysayers and propagandists, and I don't know how to describe you guys, but this goes out to Tucker Carlson. Tucker, why don't you go visit Nigeria yourself? Why don't you go to the middle belt of Nigeria? Why don't you take yourself to Benue State? Why don't you go take yourself to Plateau? Go take yourself to Southern Kaduna. Go take a trip to Taraba. Why don't you go talk to the survivors of these massacres that are now living in total, awful, horrendous conditions? The 3 million Christians that have been displaced from their homes. Why don't you go talk to the survivors of the 7,000 Christians that have been massacred since January 1st? I don't know what game you're playing or who's influencing you or who's paying you behind closed doors to regurgitate a pro-Islamist narrative.
Now, personally look at the situation. I go, okay, 7,000 Christians. Does the United States government need to step in? Is there anybody else that can take a look at this, right? But that's neither here nor there. What I actually wanted to look into was whether or not the United States had an alternative motive to go in there. And I have very good reason to believe that we might. And I know that sounds shocking coming from my mouth. A lot of you guys don't, it would be like, Matt, why would you be bringing up that? Like, why would you think that the United States may have different, reasons to be going in there? And I'd present to you this right here. Syrian President Al-Shara, otherwise known as Al-Jawlani, ended up arriving in the United States for a landmark White House visit. And he is supposed to be over inside of the White House today. Some of the stuff that actually Jawlani has done with the United States of America is actually pretty freaking, I don't want to say shocking, right? For those of you that don't know, he is a former member of Al-Qaeda. Right? He's the former leader of HTS. Both of these are designated foreign terror organizations, and the former leader of the Al-Nusra Front. He was friends with al-Baghdadi, the founder of ISIS. He has like some really radical ideology. Sarah Adams claims that he ended up rejoining Al-Qaeda, I think back in like 2021, to help out with a terror plot against the United States of America. Delaware 50. Becoming a true supporter. Good to have you in the house. And Sansboy's giving out 5 Speak the Truth membership. Tristan Allen says, my former boss is fighting my unemployment. Thank God, dude. Yeah, this is getting nuts. You guys are saying this is old news, that he's coming in and everything else, but I bring this up for a reason. I bring this up for a very good reason, and it's something that I think everybody should kind of pay attention to. And it's like, I mean, if we're concerned about Christian deaths, why is it that we're also not riding on Al-Jawlani? Why is it that we don't hear the United States government going up against Al-Jawlani? Why do we have him invited into the White House? Why do we have our CENTCOM commanders playing basketball with him and all of these other things? Soul says, if we don't protect Christians, who will? Well, that's where groups such as the Free Burma Rangers come into play, and there's also other movements that I'm aware of that are going over there to take care of it. And we could also look at it and we could say that it is the responsibility of the Christian church to go over and defend them. But neither here nor there, when people are being murdered as the leaders of the free world, is the United States job to step up and step in. Yeah, I would say so, that we probably should. But here we have all the way back in March, and this is important to understand. This is March 11th of 2025. Okay, this is just a couple years or a couple months after Trump steps into office. Okay, and we have 1,300 people from the Alawite and Christians that ended up getting murdered over inside of Syria. 1,300 people in 1 month, the Christians that ended up getting murdered. We could take it a step further and we could ask, well, how many Druze ended up getting murdered over inside of southern Syria, right? Druze don't even subscribe to a typical Muslim belief, and I don't even think it's fair to call them Muslims. As a matter of fact, their religion is really closely guarded. It's close secrets, but all the way back in July, you ended up having thousands of them murdered as well over inside of Syria, mostly by Assad's men. A lot of different Muslim militias pouring in from around the country. I covered that pretty dang extensively. And so we have genocide that's taking place over inside of a country where the current leader of said country is being invited into the White House today. Somebody please make that make sense. If we are concerned about genocide, why do we have a leader of a country going into a White House today that used to murder U.S. troops, that used to fight on the side of Islamic terror, and likely still does, to be perfectly honest, fight on the side of Islamic terror, was arrested by U.S. troops over in Iraq? It said, I could pound that freaking nail into the coffin so dang deep it comes out the other side of the body, and most of you guys still aren't going to get it. But why do we have this man that's murdering people inside of his own country coming into the United States and going into the White House, and he's murdering Christians, he's murdering Druze, they're murdering all sorts of people, and yet we are concerned with Christians being killed over inside of Nigeria? Sounds kind of weird to me, right? So I had to go and I had to take a look into this and say, why is this even possible? And what I ended up discovering when I looked into it a little bit deeper was this. I ended up finding out that Tesla, Elon Musk's company Tesla, had a bid to mine lithium over inside of Nigeria all the way back in 2022. Now, for those of you that don't know, the lithium mine in Nigeria is still on this emerging global market, right? They are just now digging into the lithium deposits over inside of Nigeria, and they're supposed to be huge. And when I say huge, I'm talking I think it's 32 billion or something like that. It's a massive freaking market that's supposed to go up. It has the potential to take over and be the largest lithium mine operation over inside of Africa. I mean, it's that big. But guess who ended up winning the contract in 2023 and then ended up, how do I want to say this? and then ended up mining operations starting last year in 2024. That'd be China. So you have China now that has gone into Nigeria, that had beat out Elon Musk's company and is operating this massive lithium mine over there. Now, my question is, if we are concerned with Christians being killed, I talked about this last week. You still have thousands of Christians that have been killed over inside of Sudan. Why didn't Trump bring up Sudan as well? As a matter of fact, we could look across like an entire like middle belt, like going through Africa, all of those countries over there in between Nigeria and Sudan. We could say, look, people are being murdered at an alarming rate over here. Christians and everybody alike. And when I talked about it last week, when I brought it up, it's not that Boko Haram is over inside of Nigeria and they're hunting down all of these people. I think maybe I ought to like put this up on the screen to like kind of bring it into you guys just a little bit more. Give me 1 second here while I pull this up, because I want you guys to see this, because it is kind of important to me. Because there's something that I think you guys need to also understand about like this region and what has been taking place over the last couple of years. I think anybody that just looks at this as an isolated incident is a little bit silly. Did you guys know that like I'm sure most of you guys know that we've been in Africa for a while, right? So here is Nigeria, right? Like right up here in the middle of your screen, and just to the north of it, we have Niger. I don't know if you guys remember like the Tonga Tonga ambush that took place all the way back in 2017, where we ended up having members of our special operations that ended up getting killed, right? One of my buddies actually got shot in the face while wearing his helmet cam in this operation. It wasn't really cool at all, right? And all that took place in Nigeria. Not too far, or I'm sorry, over in Niger, not too far from like the border with Nigeria. And you have the same terrorists that are operating up there back and forth between like both little areas. We, however, the United States ended up pulling out of that region not that long ago, and Russia ended up moving in right behind us, right? There was videos of all of this coming out, and you just watch all of that like unfolding. You literally watching like our troops that are on their way out with Russian troops that are on their way in. Now that wasn't over inside of Nigeria, but for the love of God, why did we pull out of that area if we wanted to have that complete impact going on over there? So we backed out. So we do have this terror organization over there, Boko Haram, and they're not very big. They're just, under probably about 10,000 estimated, right? And a lot of them are tribes members that are joining up and want to do this. And a lot of that is taking place up here in this corner. But those Christians, they're being murdered like right over here in like this middle area, right over here around like the center of it. So the terrorists are up in the north. You have them that are coming down to the south. And what you actually have are a bunch of tribesmen that are going in there who are Muslim. It's like not beat around the bush on this one. All right. You have a bunch of Muslim tribesmen that are going in and killing them. And you have members of Boko Haram that are working their way in there as well, along with ISWAP, right? So you have some Islamic State members that are like working their way down in there, but mostly Boko Haram. And these Christians that are being murdered, a lot of it is over like this whole tribal region. And so I had to look into it and say, what the hell? If we're so concerned, and like I said, Sudan is just a stone's throw away. I mean, there's one country right in the middle, Chad, in between Sudan and Nigeria, and you have Christians that are being killed over in Sudan as well. So why are we focused on Nigeria and not the Christians being murdered in Sudan, not the Christians being murdered inside of Syria? As a matter of fact, we're inviting the president of Syria into the White House for the second time this year. You have to ask why. And I haven't even began to speak to you guys about what's taking place over in Venezuela right now, right? Like, because Venezuela is a whole other thing. Do you realize that we have 20% of our deployable forces from the United States Navy over like running that operation? 20% of our deployable forces from the United States, 15 to 20, but 20% of the high end of our United States Navy, even 15% is an asinine amount. 15 to 20% of our deployable forces from the United States Navy operating over outside of Venezuela right now to blow up what? I mean, you guys understand that over in that operation as well, we haven't exactly like put that big of an impact. Since we started our strikes, we've only taken it out 16 or 17 freaking drug running boats. That's it. Estimated 16 or 17 drug running boats. That's all. So 15 to 20% of our Navy took out about 16 boats from Venezuela. Why are we focusing and pushing so hard on all of these other things? And I think you need to look a little bit deeper, and you need to say, listen, we have an issue that's taking place, and that issue, and I don't think the Trump administration wants to admit it right now, because maybe we'd be going to war. But I think when he brought up and he said, listen, if you're going and attacking the US dollar, you're 100% going to war with America, and we're going to be coming after you. When I was running around in Africa, like well over a decade ago, I can tell you that like the Chinese presence over here was out of control. Like you couldn't go anywhere without like it's almost like they were starting like their little like mandates all across of Africa, right? Like they're going in, they're plugging themselves in these little regions. And what we're discovering is in countries like Nigeria, for example, they have a buttload of lithium, and we need lithium. We want lithium. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at all of the different tariffs and stuff like that Trump has imposed, most of the countries that end up backing off, that we end up giving a cut or a break to, we end up getting mineral rights and minerals deals out of those different countries. So this isn't like something that, in my opinion, we need to be looking at and saying, why is it that all of these Christians are being murdered, and what are we doing? If Trump is ordering the Secretary of War to go protect 7,000 Christians in Nigeria, great. That on face value, I might even be able to get behind. But what I can't get behind is if we are going over into Nigeria because of lithium and nobody wants to talk about it. Everybody said that the war in the Middle East was because of oil. I actually don't believe that. There was a legitimate threat over in the Middle East to the United States of America. I saw it firsthand. I don't think that Iraq was some sort of a massive lie or massive foil, massive plot. But when I take a look at Nigeria in particular, and I take a look at who we are currently bringing into the White House, then all of a sudden I have problems. Right? Like this is a big freaking deal, like massive deal. And I think a lot of people are kind of ignoring what it is that we have to look at, which is a problem. Somebody says, oh my God, lithium. Yeah, lithium. You know what they need to put inside of those batteries for like those different Teslas, like for all of the different EVs, and lithium is used in a lot of different things. But when you have a deposit estimated over $34 billion US and the US was not allowed to mine it, all of a sudden, the next year, Trump gets in office and we're going to go to war in Nigeria while welcoming in a terrorist that's killed U.S. service members and has actively and currently likely still massacring his own people. The only reason we don't have good figures on how many Christians have been slaughtered over inside of Syria is because of how ridiculously unstable that situation is. And oh, by the way, Jawlani's got access to chemical weapons. Like that's a much bigger freaking problem. And you might look at it and say, you know what, Jawlani's got access to WMDs, so is Pakistan. So we're friends with Pakistan, right? We're friends with Pakistan, therefore because they've got nukes, so maybe we should be friends with Jawlani because he's got access to chemical weapons and we don't want him to use chemical weapons. Well, if we're taking a stance against the murdering of Christians, don't you think it'd be a good idea to take a stance against Jawlani as well? Why haven't we put that man on the spot? Why hasn't anybody asked him questions about that in particular? Why is that stuff not happening? I see happy birthday Marines. Rah! You freaking nut jobs. Every single one of you guys are all absolute nut jobs. I love the Marine Corps to death, man. You guys are freaking great. Long story short, this man that's coming to the White House today, last year, this time, had a $10 million bounty on his head by the United States government. And I want you guys to wrap your head around that. A $10 million bounty on his head. That bounty got removed by Joe Biden in December of 2024. When Trump got in office, then you had Secretary Rubio remove the FTO designation from HTS. Now they're running Syria. So you have a man who had a $10 million bounty on his head, former member of Al-Qaeda, former friend with al-Baghdadi, who he can't be friends with anymore because he's dead. And you have all of this crap going on. He's coming to the White House. And at the same time, the president that's going to be shaking hands with this man today is going off on Nigeria and Christians being killed, all in less than a year. America, wake the hell up. For the love of God, please wake the hell up. Now, tonight, I'm going to actually have Nate from Valhalla VFT up over here on this channel. Him and I are going to have a discussion about like American isolationism. I think he's more of an isolationist. He doesn't want any money. He doesn't want our military being spent like abroad. He doesn't want to see any of that stuff happening unless it's like directly impacting the United States of America. So him and I are going to be talking about foreign policies. I'm not an isolationist. I think our military can and should proactively defend the citizens of the United States of America. He's got a little bit of a different stance on it. Both him and I are going to be going back and forth on this for probably quite a while, but we're also friends. So we're going to have a good, honest discussion about it. But nonetheless, here is our senior military leadership. This is going to be your central command commander, the guy that's in charge of Syria, playing basketball with Jawlani. Like, that's a serious video. Like that is the U.S. CENTCOM commander playing basketball with a terrorist. Now we could look at this and we could say this is progress, this is a step forward. The problem is that whole Islamic thing, taqiyya, where they're allowed to lie in order to advance like their religion and their religious goals, right? Like this is more than likely a massive plot to play the United States to get the backing by the international community so that Jawlani can continuously go around and systematically start murdering his people while we pretend like he's fighting it. And then inside Venezuela, we have the same problem with Russia and China operating over inside of Venezuela and having a huge impact. So to me, when I look at this situation, the common thread, the common denominator between every single one of these situations is China and it's Russia and it's communism. We're backing the people that are going against communism. And I think for the love of God, the only thing that we really have inside of Nigeria, I hate to say it, I'm not saying that 7,000 Christians aren't being murdered over there, but we've got to ask ourselves a serious question. 7,000 Christians murdered inside of Nigeria this year. Yes, that's a big deal. Is it a big enough deal for the United States to deploy its military over there, get U.S. service members killed in order to stop it? Some people would argue yes. I would argue that there's something much bigger at stake. When we take a look at what's taking place over inside of Venezuela, you got to ask yourself, why Venezuela? The United States government says that it's because of the amount of drugs that are pouring out of that country and coming into the United States. Yes, we could look at Maduro. We could look at his ties to the Colombian cartels. We could say that Venezuela is a decent transfer point and everything else. You know what else is in Venezuela? A freaking superhighway going from Venezuela up into the United States. And it has a lot, and I mean a lot, of freaking Chinese citizens that are being shoved into there and working their way up. What you have up on your screen right now is the top 5 countries in the world that feed drugs into the United States. These are the top 5 countries in the United States feeding drugs in here. Carney says, Matt, I have heard that Jawlani got flipped by the U.S. while in Abu Ghraib. What are your thoughts on that? I don't trust him regardless, and most people don't understand the Middle East culture. Thank you and God bless. If Jawlani got flipped while he's in Abu Ghraib, and what he's talking about, I think it was in 2006 or 2007 when he ended up making it into prison over there, inside of Iraq. He got arrested by U.S. forces and got thrown into prison, right? And that's also where he met Baghdadi, just FYI. If he got flipped in Abu Ghraib, if Jawlani legitimately was flipped in Abu Ghraib and he was operating as a U.S. asset, why did we not take out Baghdadi way earlier on? Why was ISIS allowed to get to the point where it had gotten? Jawlani had gone from Iraq. Let me get this map. Jawlani had gone from Iraq up over into Syria, right? And up in the north, probably around, I want to say it was like 2009, 10-ish, is when you started to hear about these ISIS militants that were coming into play, right? But they weren't calling themselves ISIS at the time. They hadn't like opened up and been like, we are but that's when they were starting to emerge over there. And all of that's because Baghdadi ended up fleeing up over into Syria, and that's where he ended up founding ISIS. Well, at the time that was happening, right, Jawlani was running around in this region over here around Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor, all of that crap over here inside of eastern Syria. And while he was over there, he was still operating like underneath Al-Qaeda. Jawlani had sent him, Baghdadi had sent him over there to like recruit for like Al-Qaeda and stuff. And it wasn't until Al-Qaeda had kicked him out that all of this crap ended up happening, right? So I think if he was a flipped U.S. asset, we would have had a lot more intel on what the hell Baghdadi was doing at the time and the amount of fighters that he had recruited and held in for like ISIS, and as big as a problem as it was, and maybe we would have done something a little bit more about it. I also don't think as a U.S. asset as Jawlani, if he was a U.S. asset, I mean, we had U.S. Special Operations Forces running around inside Syria for like a decade. So why weren't we working a hell of a lot closer with him? Why weren't we pushing over behind him and his men and everything else? We just never saw any of that as it was taking place, right? And so again, we got to ask these questions like, why is this the way that it is? Why did things unfold the way that they unfolded if he was an asset? And I don't think that we have the evidence to even show on face value that there is any way, shape, or form that we were getting intelligence on him. Beast Gaming says, I mean, come on, we left how much crap over there, and then all of a sudden Assad falls. Then we support the terrorist that takes it over. Right. Well, I was looking at that. And I mean, this is also something that I talked about, which ended up boiling down to the Epstein files. Like, and it's not a joke when I bring up the Epstein. Like, I don't like talking about the Epstein files at all, because I think there is a much like bigger picture at play here, right? Like, I think when we talk about the Epstein files, we're negating the fact that you have an entire world that was at play within that. A lot of people are looking at it like, no, it's key members in Congress here at home, or maybe it's Hollywood elites, or maybe it's this and maybe it's that. No, it was quite literally world leaders, and we know that to be true. We know that the current crown prince of Saudi Arabia was pictured with Epstein, right? Just a couple weeks ago, or no, it was a couple months ago now. Time flies. A couple months ago, when we ended up having those pictures that ended up getting released from Epstein's New York mansion, we ended up discovering that, yeah, in fact, MBS was pictured with and flying on the freaking, house of Epstein over in his New York mansion. So MBS, Epstein pictured in his New York mansion. We also know that Epstein had an Australian passport, not a U.S. passport, an Australian passport that had stamps going in and out of Saudi Arabia. Good question. Why was he going in and out of Saudi Arabia? We also have his flight logs tracking in and out of Saudi Arabia as well, right? We see that his flight had literally gone in one time. We'd seen that his flight had gone in, came off the Med, came over, skirted up across the Sinai Peninsula into Jordan, and then his transponder flicked off at the border. So now you got a man with an Australian passport flicking his transponder off at the border as he flies over Jordan into Saudi. He's got pictures of himself over inside of Saudi. Dude, so many freaking connections over in there, and that happens. It's my belief, and I'll wrap it up in a nutshell, all right, that we like, and if you look inside of his mansion, right, if you look inside of Epstein Island in his mansion, there's hidden cameras all over the place inside of all those mansions. People think it's because he's a dirty man and he wanted to collect dirt or just have like little like child porn videos or whatever to blast on the internet. I don't think that's it. I think it was literally to get freaking dirt on world leaders. And I think the reason we're seeing people like Al-Jawlani and everybody else that's coming into play right now is because Saudi Arabia was one of the people that ended up getting targeted by that whole Epstein client list deal. And I think he had dirt on Saudi leadership. And I think Saudi leadership now knows it. I think that's why Trump's not releasing the Epstein files, because it would appear, it might not be true, but it would most certainly appear as if Epstein was running a child sex trafficking ring on a world level and collecting freaking dirt on them in order to blackmail them to push U.S. policy overseas. That's what I think. And I think that's the reason why Trump's not releasing it, because the U.S. would lose all of its like international like foothold, all of its international policy, all of its stance. That's what I think after looking into it and researching it. I haven't touched on it in a couple months, but that's what I think. Right? Over inside of Israel, what's taking place over there, dude, yellow line's holding great. They're doing a good job. They're holding the yellow line. 3 Israeli service members have been killed, to be expected when dealing with terrorists. They've been fighting back and forth. But the real problem to me is this. And we also look at the impact that Iran was having over inside of Syria as well with the IRGC. Like, all of these are great reasons for the U.S. to back the new leader of Syria if he wasn't a former member of Al-Qaeda. And likely what ends up happening here too, when you look at it, is you say, you know what, maybe if we didn't do that, maybe if we didn't back him up there in this particular situation, just maybe Russia would have tried to step back in, or the IRGC would have tried to step back in. That wouldn't have happened, because IRGC was fighting against Al-Jawlani's men along with members of Hezbollah. But why would we be backing this man? It's insane. So I'm personally kind of over it when we go to take a look at it. And then we have other things that end up going down inside of the world that go completely and totally ignored. Point in case this one right here. When we start looking at this, how many of you guys are aware, by show of hands, how many of you guys were aware that a major terror attack involving Ricin that could have killed upwards of 250,000 to 500,000 people was just averted over inside of India today? This isn't a joke. 250,000 to 500,000 people could have been killed if this hadn't have been caught. That would have been the largest terror attack that I'm aware of, like single terror attack in history. Would have wiped out the entire, like, they had enough Ricin mash when they got caught to wipe out the entire city of Richmond, Virginia. If you'd have taken this and like put it into aerosol, the entire city of Richmond, Virginia, that's how much Ricin concentrate that they had. I know it sounds crazy. Maybe some of you guys are familiar with ricin from Breaking Bad. I call it a poor man's chemical weapon because it's very finicky, right? Like ricin can only survive, and it's very, very potent and very, very powerful, but only takes like a very, very tiny amount in order to poison people, right? But it can't survive in like different extreme temperatures, right? So you've got to be very careful about when and where you end up employing it. Cole Hubbard says, who cares? I think you should care, Cole Hubbard, because over, 2 weeks ago, Dearborn, Michigan, or was it last week, Dearborn, Michigan, when we had those 4 ISIS terrorists that ended up getting arrested for plotting a terror attack. They were going to go down and they were going to conduct an attack up over in Ohio, I think, if I remember right. They ended up getting arrested. We had ISIS terrorists get arrested over inside of Oklahoma last year. We've had them get arrested over inside of California. We have ISIS terrorists getting arrested all around the United States of America, and all this stuff is going down. So now you got to ask yourself, if they are unsuccessful doing these, and by the way, those were shooting plots that were going to be taking place, right? Like active shooter scenarios that they were trying to do. We know they have the ability to build explosive devices. So how do you make explosives? Well, chemistry, to be perfectly honest. Well, how do you make ricin? Chemistry. Now you've got to employ it at a certain time of year. It's got to be in a certain place, and you have to have all of this other crap. But ricin within itself is a pretty damn dangerous thing. You're talking about 250,000 to 500,000 people they had the capability of killing. That's insane. People say air is not the way. Great. Well, okay. Well, you also have these people because, again, they're here in the U.S. What happens when somebody puts it in food? What happens when somebody puts it in our food supply? What happens? These are all very solid questions, right? Now, who was behind this terror attack? It was ISIS-K. And this is the other thing that really pisses me off about Biden. Was we fought our asses off to get rid of ISIS-K. We were killing them left and right. And we ended up backing out of there. And then you have ISIS going into India and preparing for a launch of a major terror attack. What is preventing them from doing that here? What is preventing them from doing that in the UK? Let me ask you another question. While you say, who really cares about this ricin plot over inside of India? It wasn't very many guys that ended up getting caught doing this, man. You know what they had? They had ricin and they had 2 Glocks and I think a Beretta. Like 3 pistols. Dozen rounds of ammunition. But they had a buttload of ricin. If they were planning on doing this over inside of India with just a couple guys, and we already have ISIS terrorists here in the United States, we already have ISIS terrorists over in the UK, what is preventing them from coordinating and working together on a mass plot across all of them? Why do you think that this is just isolated to India because they got caught? Do you know how much ricin mash they ended up having, by the way? It wasn't very much. Like in the overall grand scheme of things, like 4 kilograms. That's it. I know I talked about 250,000 to 500,000 people dying, but in reality, they had 4 kilograms. I mean, not much. Not much ricin mass. You're talking like 8 or 9 pounds worth of the crap. 9 pounds-ish. That's it. And they could take that and they could disseminate it across their little different cells that they have. And they could start dumping it into our food supply. They could do, dude, there's all sorts of crap that they can do with it. Man, once it's there, you're done. Is a kilogram more than a grain? A kilogram is 2.2 pounds. A kilogram is 2.2 pounds. What I am trying to tell you is that we have very real issues in this world. And right now, I want you to go back and I want you to think about how I opened the show when I was talking about what a huge pain in the butt it was for me just to go on a flight. How I pretty much haven't slept all dang night. I actually ended up missing a news interview with Jake Novak this morning. I got to write him an apology immediately following this. We can't even manage our own airspace right now. We can't even manage our own airspace right now. Last week on the show, we had a guy come in here. We had multiple people that came in a message and say that they had worked for TSA or a security contracting company for DPS, and that we had people with fake passports that were being allowed access into the airport, allowed being access onto runways. We had people with fake passports down inside Florida, allegedly, that were being allowed onto aircraft. How much more evidence do you need that we are ridiculously vulnerable and we need to get our crap together? I don't know how else to tell you that. Like, all of these deportations of everybody getting kicked out of the United States of America right now is a very good thing. And I know that we have certain cases that we can go and we can point to and we can look at and we can say, look, you have, this mother and this father, or this guy was having a seizure and this kid was in a car, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's just, I mean, when you're doing things on a mass scale, you're going to get that. And I think that ICE needs to have way more training, especially as I hire these guys. I think there needs to be way more funding that goes into law enforcement in general, all sorts of crap. But when I tell you that we can't even manage our own airspace right now, that we have Americans that are so pissed off that they're raiding Walmarts, we have all sorts of crap that's taking place in the United States. Nobody's even paying attention to what's happening abroad. 20%, 16 to 20% of our deployable naval forces dedicated to Venezuela. Over what? I ended up having it up on the screen earlier. These are the major countries. These are the top 5 major contributors to illegal drugs by percentage here in the United States of America. Mexico provides 85% of drugs flowing into America. 85%. Do we have 20% of our armed forces, any branch, dedicated to Mexico? Colombia, 13%. Now, we could take this and we could say that Colombia might be funneling a bunch of stuff going over into Venezuela, and we've got a bunch of things that are coming out of there back and forth. Great. But does that 13% come anywhere near the 85% that's flowing into our country from Mexico? There is something greater at hand when we start looking into this. Do you know who else has massive influence over India where this terror attack was taking place? China's one. China. And when we start talking about India funneling stuff into the United States, and we start talking about Venezuela being a massive, massive transition point for a lot of different drugs and stuff that are being sent in the United States, and we have India supplying 0.5% of drugs, great. So there's a line there that exists. And we know that we have Chinese people that are being funneled through Venezuela to make their way up here in the United States of America. So yeah, I got to ask myself, are we stopping all of these boats coming out of Venezuela because there is a major terror plot that the cartels may or may not even be aware of, that they are hustling and moving goods for into the United States of America in order to kill Americans? I just told you 4 kilograms worth of that ricin mash can kill 250,000 to 500,000 people. 4 kilograms. How much of that crap can you fit on one boat coming out of Venezuela? How much of that crap can you fit? Like, dude, it's insane to me. 20% of our naval forces dedicated over outside of Venezuela, and Maduro is a raging pile of garbage. Make no mistake about it. He's not a good guy. His connections with the cartels, everybody else, and I'm not even saying that drugs are bad. Like, the drugs aren't bad and that we shouldn't be stopping the inflow of drugs. But 85% of the drugs coming to this country are coming out of Mexico, not Venezuela. Mexico. So now let's use some common sense here. We are going into Nigeria to stop probably communism, going back to the Truman Doctrine. We are siding with Al-Jawlani over inside of Syria for reasons my brain can't even possibly comprehend right now. And we have Venezuela, where we have the massive portion of our Navy dedicated. And over inside of India, which, by the way, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, BRICS nations, we have a BRICS nation where you had this terror plot that was taking place. And we have a pipeline in between both of those nations, or we have a pipeline in between India and Venezuela, and Chinese citizens working their way into the United States. And you have this ricin and everything. Ladies and gentlemen, what I am telling you is that you need to be very, very aware of all of these different scenarios in the world. I think the United States government wants you to believe and doesn't want you to panic by saying that we have the most secure border in United States history. I know that quite possibly to not be, I mean, it might be true that we have the most secure border, but pretending as if the United States is perfectly secure, in my opinion, is a lie, right? As if our border is secure. Let me pull this up for a minute because some of you guys haven't seen this. I want to, come on now. Let me see if I can find him up over on X. He might have an X channel. I want you guys to look into this guy. He runs something that's called the GOAT Initiative out of California. His name is Corey. And Corey has some wild freaking crap that the GOAT Initiative has been able to find down on the California border. And by the way, this isn't an old video. This is September 28th, right? And this is verified information. Okay, this guy has this information. I want you guys to listen.
So I would like to give you guys a little insight on what the GOAT Initiative has been working on. We've been working very hard. We're still doing the original stuff, which we started doing, collecting intelligence, abandoned intelligence along the southern border, and trying to find where these people went, most especially children. The children have become extremely hard to find, but we're not going to stop there. On the way, we've stumbled across, I don't even know where to begin on what we've stumbled across. We have these binders full of intelligence reports. I probably have a dozen of them now that my team has created based on mostly open source analysis. And so let's just get into something real quick. This cell phone was found in a major smuggling corridor of the San Diego County mountains, right along the border. My team got into the cell phone and we figured out that this person came from the area in between Pakistan and Afghanistan. I'll put it up on the screen for you. It just so happens that the United States is quite familiar with this area. We're quite familiar with the people that like us there and the people that don't like us there. So what's up with this dude? Why did he do this? Why is he here? Well, once we got into his phone, we started looking through his pictures. That's usually the first thing I do. And we saw that he has pictures of himself at demonstrations in Pakistan. And then turns out that he's one of the leaders of the organization that he's with in Pakistan. One of the pictures is of a document the Pakistani government sent to him, deeming him and his organization a terrorist organization.
I can't turn the volume up anymore, ladies and gentlemen, but let me fill you in on what he said so far. He said that number one, just to give you guys an idea, he's running an operation where he goes down to the southern border in California, and he goes and he collects information. This is extremely unsecured location. This guy, if we go and we dig through his stuff, what you're going to end up seeing is all sorts of crap that he ends up picking up. What he's going over right now is one of the cell phones that he ended up picking up off the ground at the U.S. border. And it's of a Pakistani/Afghani guy that ends up working his way and crossing into the United States of America. That's where you're caught up. So this is a cell phone of this Pakistani that is a leader of a terror organization that worked his way into the United States of America.
Now, this terrorist, according to Pakistan, is living somewhere near you. We have addresses, phone numbers, and Facebook messages, Instagram messages, Facebook business messages. The phone still works, and we still get all of them. He never logged out. So why does the GOAT Initiative know where a lot of these people are, who they are, and what they're doing? And the government, your government, the ones that we helped get elected, are sitting on their hands. When something happens, and we had something that could have prevented it, who's getting fired? Let me know. Let me know why you think the people that we helped get elected aren't calling.
Texas, I see your message. Do me a favor. I can't see you in the DM. Like, I don't have a DM from you. Shoot it to me on Signal because I don't see it anywhere. So I don't know if it's a technology issue that's going on right now. But Ladies and gentlemen, when we go and we start looking at like the amount of stuff that Corey has gathered just off that southern border, it is absolutely shocking the amount of crap that they have. It's insane. The amount of stuff, and he's had people from the United States government down there a ton. I mean, shit. Here's him talking about a Sudanese ID that he finds at the border.
Right now in Sudan, in October or now November 2025, Christians are being executed, churches are being burned, and women are forced to convert to Islam.
This is him talking about it. Talking about finding a Sudanese passport down at the border, all sorts of stuff, and the videos and stuff, and the information that he ends up finding. I hate that he is so dang quiet. I have to shoot him a message, tell him to like get a little bit louder. But the amount of crap that's down there on the border is unreal, and you have to pay attention. Like, our border is not secure, and so when we to bring this back full circle, when we start talking about these different threats and these different plots around the world, ladies and gentlemen, it is a very serious thing, and I want you guys to take it very serious. You might think that a little bit of ricin, 4 kilograms of ricin in India is not a big deal, but you have to understand like the rat lines that are in place in between these different countries to make their way into the United States. I think you VBIED times 2 India today, that's amazing. I mean, it's not amazing. That's horrible news, but I mean, it doesn't surprise me that that's also taking place. Like, I think they're trying to destabilize India. I think they're trying to launch a new war over inside of India in order to suck up more Russian oil. For those that don't know, India is the largest consumer of the Russian oil exports. And once you end up sparking off a war over there and India goes to war with these Islamic extremists over inside of Pakistan or any other region of the world, all right, you end up having a massive draw and need for oil as Russia's ruble is beginning to slowly collapse because of all of the different sanctions and stuff like that. They've got to keep their oil profitable. If India is at war and they need more oil from Russia, they'll pretty much pay whatever they need in order to go and kill these people. So who cares, right? Now that war in Ukraine is going to keep going. Long story short, ladies and gentlemen, there's a hell of a lot more to the situation in the world that I think you are really, really made aware of. And it disturbs me that our government is just going, okay, well, but drugs here and Christians here and communism, not okay. Don't invade Ukraine. When the reality is, I think that we have Russia and China mainly that are pushing very hard to destabilize the West. And an attack like this that ends up taking place, U.S. would demand action. We would end up going to war over it. We have all sorts of issues. We're $38 trillion in debt. Launching another war is just going to end up hurting us even more. I hope you guys found this information valuable that I ended up sharing with you today. I didn't sleep at all last night, really. So I need to get some rest. I wanted to come on here this morning because I wanted to provide you guys with a show. I know I wasn't here Friday. I was traveling. I'm going to be doing some more traveling this week and in the weeks to come. And now likely I'm going to be driving. By the way, if you're worried about the government shutdown, mark the date on your calendar somewhere around October 18th. A little bird has told me that October 18th is probably when the government shutdown is likely going to end. And this ripple effect that we're currently seeing pushing its way across the United States with air traffic and all of that crap, that's just going to keep pushing out further and further. So expect that to get worse and worse, by the way, as like the weeks carry on here. You got another week of dealing with this crap. All right, so one more week. Government shutdown, hopefully next week is over, but then understand it's going to take forever to start these processes back up, and it's going to suck. Meanwhile, our border isn't necessarily secure. We got a buttload of illegals running around this country. For some reason, we decided to deploy 1 out of every 5 of our deployable ships in the United States Navy down off Venezuela, and you got a massive terror attack taking place over inside of India. Could have killed over 250,000 people. Could have taken out the entire city of Richmond, Virginia, Reno, Nevada. Take your pick. 250,000-ish plus people. If they did it effectively, it could go all the way up to 500,000. But that's a ton of people, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. I do need to get off. I do need to get some rest. I'm extremely tired. I haven't changed since yesterday morning. I'm still in what I wore when I was flying. I probably smell like crap. But I love you guys. I wanted to make sure I come on here and give you guys a good, honest show. And I'm going to see you guys tonight. Like I said, Nate from Valhalla VFT is going to end up being back here. I hope you guys really appreciate that discussion as him and I go on to discuss whether or not U.S. abroad and this isolation mentality. I think that isolation mentality is what is going to get us killed. And I think that's what got us to this point. I think that's what got us Al-Jawlani. I think that's what got us Venezuela and Nigeria and all of this other crap in Nigeria. I think that's what allowed the IRGC to get to the point where it's at and allow Russia to push as deep as it and hard as it has over into Ukraine. I don't think that Ukraine fell out of the sky. I think that there's some very clear-cut signs beforehand that all of that was going down way before 2014 into 2015. And I think if the U.S. would have actually stepped up and got away from that complete and total isolationist mentality, been like, and actually taking care of things proactively, would it have been done? As far as self-defense goes, I don't have to wait for somebody to shoot at me in order to shoot back, right? I don't have to do that. I don't have to wait for somebody to punch me before I get them out of my face. Right now, we have all of these Islamic terrorists that are up over inside of our face. And the main narrative that's being pushed right now is Jews are bad. Look out for the Jews in America. The Jews are running America. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, everything is getting freaking wrecked. And America is extremely vulnerable. Extremely vulnerable. Somebody brought it up to me the other day, Operation SIG. I want to say it was Operation SIG back in the 1970s, where Russia had actually launched a campaign media plot in order to turn the United States against the Jews. And I'm not sitting here standing up for the Jewish people and saying, look, you need to pay attention. You shouldn't be allowed to question Israel. No, question them all you want. Just bring facts. Stop wasting people's time because we have terrorists that are plotting to kill over 250,000 people. Bring facts. Don't bring assumptions. Bring some solid freaking facts into the equation. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you found it valuable, you can take this clip, you can cut it, you can share it, you can do anything you want with it. I don't care. Take this information, get it out there. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, peace, love, happiness. God bless. Thank you, every single person that ended up donating to this channel today. I love you. I'm out of here.